Lions, Wolverines, and Spartans news. Today we will be covering Lions new edition, newest edition, I should say. A few draft prospects at 17 that make sense, or what position they may go with. And we're gonna do a 7 round Lions mock draft, the first one of the year on the show. So it should be a lot of fun. With that being said, we will also talk a little bit about the Puka Nakua situation, some NFL trade rumors, and then, some other news around the league. So without further ado, let's get right into it. The Detroit Lions have signed a new safety, Chuck Clark, the veteran. Will definitely come in and help our room. He's a solid veteran, a 70.3 PFF grade last year, which was 26th overall, which means, I mean, if you think about it, he's a top player at his position per PFF because there are 64 starting safeties in the NFL, and he was 26th, so that puts him in the top half of all safeties in the NFL. And I'm not saying that's necessarily the truth with what we're getting, but that's at least what PFF sees. Whoop, sorry about that. Tornado warning. And we're just gonna keep it pushing. Um, with that being said, I that was old. I don't know why my phone just got it, but it happened about 30 minutes ago in my area. So,
So
uh,
just be safe, man.
yeah, all good and
Please.
good. The actual siren's not even going anymore, so I'm not too worried about it. Watching the news earlier, it said it was gonna miss us by a decent amount if it even formed. It hadn't even formed yet. So, um, with that being said, though, back to Chuck Clark. The Lions brought him in. Obviously he's going to be a great backup for us, but he'll also, kind of step in and play at the beginning of the year with, Kirby Joseph and Brian Branch. Both likely injured to start the year. And even if Kirby Joseph isn't quote unquote injured, I don't know how much he's going to play the first like half of the season. If he plays, it might be on a snap count. Who knows what their, outlook on that is with his knee. Really haven't been at many updates with that yet. So, but in my opinion, Clark is like the perfect backup when those guys are healthy because he can step in and play and he can do a very, very good job. And like I said before, he brings a very solid veteran presence, very, consistent. He's an in the box kind of safety. Not really a guy I'm going to be putting in the Kirby Joseph role by any means. He's definitely not like a rangy free safety. He's an in the box run defender, which, really helps us because he's a physical guy, and he can bring some versatility to the unit. So pretty solid signing in my opinion, and kind of goes along with what the Lions have been doing all free agency with the bargain bin, shopping, as we've said, bargain bin Brad. And I think that's the best way to do it. I mean, we've signed the most free agents since Brad's first free agency when we had 13. We have 11 this year. And I mean, when you're so tight on margins with money to be able to bring this many cheap, talented, veteran players in is a really good sign, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm just gonna get called a Brad Holmes lover anyways, but I love what he's doing. With the confines of our financials, without mortgaging the future, because I've heard endless times, and at times said it myself, that we could restructure some other people and free up like 40 million, but that doesn't just make 40 million vanish off the books. It pushes it down to future years. So eventually we would have to pay that out. So by getting some of these bargain deals, these are pretty solid players in the totality of our offseason that we've acquired. And by not restructuring everyone we could have, I believe it was only golf that actually officially got restructured. That's paying more of those guys now, so that way we have more wiggle room further down the road. So that's one thing I feel like a lot of people aren't talking about, and maybe they just don't care about the future and they just want to go all in now. But I feel like Brad Holmes has done a impressive job with getting veterans in places of needs. For example, like Clark, we needed a safety between Branch and Kirby, even after we got Eisen from Tampa Bay. And um, so we have filled our needs with people that have starting experience, especially like a guy like Clark. He's 30. I know he doesn't go exactly into the youth movement they had earlier this offseason, but he can be a starting safety week one, like you said, pending on whatever's going on with Kirby. And in addition to that, obviously Brian Branch is not expected to be there week one. So we signed two safeties this off season, and we might need two safeties. And like I said, it gives us a chance to compete now, as well as not handcuffing ourselves in the future. So I really do like the Clark signing. Um, he played in 15 games last year for Pittsburgh. He only had 5 starts. I shouldn't just say only because he might only have 5 starts with us when Branch comes back, so to speak. But he's made a lot of starts over his career, handful last year, and he even had a key PBU in the end zone on Tesla when the Lions played him last year. I know a couple people when we signed him were sharing that. Technically a highlight because it was for him, but a low light at the time. It was a potential contested catch, but he did manage to break up the play. And sorry, I thought I heard
Sorry
talking
about
then.
that. I thought I was muted. Sorry.
Oh, okay. I didn't know if okay, my bad. Um, where did I lose my spot here? Oh, and in terms of Clark, that's what I was gonna say. Is he had that PBU against Tesla, so is he won't be completely foreign to Lions fans, and he made a play against us. So I know, as you mentioned, he is much better in the box versus the run, but there's at least an example of him having a PBU on us last season.
Yeah, for sure. And sorry about that interruption, guys. Currently under a tornado warning, so just trying to pay a little bit of attention there. If the feed cuts out, assume my power is out, and that means we will not be back, unfortunately. With that being said, though, moving on to some not so nice Lions front office news. There's a lot of reports going around right now talking about different instances where the Lions got money back from their stars after they retired early. It's been a common occurrence with like, Calvin Johnson, Barry Sanders, and now Frank Ragnow. This was a big, big discussion point a few days ago, so I felt we'd be remiss without at least mentioning it. I don't want to spend too much time here though, because I don't think there's really too much to talk about. In my opinion, at least, it's a business, and I know obviously the Lions are one of the only teams that do this to like their all pro level players and everything like that. But with that being said, like, you said it on Twitter. I know a lot of people have said it. Ragnow tried to come back. So obviously he didn't hold any like grudges against the Lions. I know Calvin Johnson did, which,
Hmm.
every guy goes through things differently and feels differently about everything. So I'm not gonna, hold that against Calvin because, they both gave a lot to this franchise and I think kind of deserve the respect to maybe not necessarily, be asked for that money back. But at the same time, I do believe there's other ways that they could have done this. They could have said like, "Hey, we don't want to make you give this money back, but we also don't want to just give it to you for free. Maybe you could do some like public appearances and do some things around the team still. Like, obviously, we're not going to ask you to play, but try to do something to work for this money a little bit, which, a lot of people would say maybe that's disrespectful because they already worked for it, quote unquote. But at the end of the day, the money is for services rendered and they did not render their services. So legally and everything like that, they have the contractual obligation to get that money back. Would I do it? Not, I don't know. Maybe necessarily it would depend on the player. For a guy like Ragnow, who played through a broken throat and all these
Yep.
different things, I don't think I would. But I do sort of understand it, but also think about it this way: it was like $3 million. So if I'm only gonna get that much money back and maybe piss off one of our greatest recent players, I think I would just leave it as is.
Yeah, I see both sides to the debate, to be honest, because when it happened to Barry, I was too young to care. I was like 8 years old when they did that. When they did it to Calvin, I kind of thought Calvin was being a little, I hate to say selfish, but at the same time, I mean, if I could potentially keep a few extra million, I would want to do that. And with Ragnow, I'm kind of on the fence because, as I mentioned on Twitter and as you pointed out, he tried to come back and play, and I saw some people say maybe that's because he could try to recoup some of his bonus. I think it had nothing to do with that part personally. I just don't think he's never been I mean, to be fair, Kelvin never was until after his career, but right now has never been a whiner or anything like that. He clearly, in my opinion, he clearly didn't show any ill will towards the team. I think he understands that's just the business part of it. And while I don't um, hate the Lions for trying to get some money back because once again, this isn't money that just goes into the Ford's pocket and they're just like, yay, we have extra money. It goes to the team salary cap and it can get us a couple players because we have signed at least three, maybe even four players this year for like 1 year, 1 million. And I know that they could have been owed 3 million, and they said they asked him to pay back a portion of that. So even if it was just like 1.5, that's still one of the entire free agents we got this year was free because it was basically on Ragnow. Um, so I don't like being um in the low light, so to speak, because we do seem to be one of the handful of teams that do this. But at least we're consistent with it, I guess, because at least we're not playing favorites like we do it to this all pro, but not that all pro. So like I'll be honest, I don't like the negative publicity, but at the same time, as you mentioned, these are for rendered services, and when you sign a 5 year contract and you only play three, they're allowed to get a portion of that back. So on one hand, I can see the team wanting it back because once again, it goes to helping the future team, and why wouldn't you want to help the future team? But on the other, these players put their life and limb on the body. Um, and I mean, obviously, I don't have to sit here and tell you how tough Ragnow is. Played through beyond so many injuries, a toe that will never heal, and et cetera, et cetera. So I see why people say he deserves his money too. So unfortunately, I'm kind of on the edge of the coin because I see both sides. But at the end of the day, as much as I love Ragnow and I love Calvin, I love the Lions before those two players were even on here. So I do want the best on on the field product I can. So if taking that money from a player adds it to the current roster, um, I'm for the side of business, even if it may seem a little shady.
Yeah, and I can't disagree there. The one thing I don't really love about it is ex players like TJ Lang chiming in and saying, "Well, you know what this is, you know what it is when you walk into this building. You know how it is." And I don't love that because that sets a precedent that it's like maybe, free agents won't want to come here, or especially like think about guys like Kevin Zeitler. Like if he was planning to retire, maybe he doesn't want to come here just in case he has something to do with, he doesn't want to have to lose any money. Who knows with that? I doubt it really makes a big difference, to be honest with you, but I just don't like you said, the bad publicity. So with
1 year deals. That way, there's
right.
nothing on the future. You can retire whenever you want. Just
True
1 year
that.
deals, re up the team every year.
Yeah, and maybe that's why Zeitler did what he did. And also, I mean, he left eventually. So, with that being said, though, moving on to our next segment of the show, we're just gonna, have a quick conversation about what the Lions might do at 17. Because coming up, we have a Lions 7 round mock draft, which is gonna be a lot of fun. But we're gonna get to that in a little bit. But like in terms of just position, like I genuinely think the Lions are going to take an offensive tackle. I do think there's a small chance they go edge depending on who's available at either position. But I really like the idea of a trade down and take a tackle, and I think that's what Brad Holmes wants to do, if I'm being honest with you. And the reason I say that is I think he wants Caden Proctor, man. I think genuinely Brad Holmes wants the Alabama tackle. And call me crazy, but Brad Holmes has been an Alabama lover in the draft, as we've all seen, throughout every draft class. He loves the SEC. He loves those kind of guys. And I mean, with what Proctor has, which we'll talk about a little bit later, I don't hate it. I do think he projects a little bit better as a right tackle in the NFL, which, Dan Campbell talked about moving Sewell to left. So I think that makes a lot of sense. And I mean, think about it. He was a consensus top 5 pick during the preseason. So if the Lions were able to get those traits, because he's very traitsy, which we'll deep dive a little bit later on Caden Proctor, not to, um, you know, give you anything we don't want to give you yet. But with that being said, I could see a lot of different things going down, trade up, even possibly depending on what's going on and what position. We really have a lot of things going for us with the 17th overall pick.
Yeah, for the longest time, I saw us just completely locked into a tackle, whether that's a left or a right. I think it just depended on how the board fell between Freeling or Fano or even Miller from Clemson, or even Proctor, who I'm not personally that high on. But um, I will agree that the Lions have done more than their homework on him. They met with him at, I can't remember if it was the Senior Bowl or the Combine, but I know they met with him for sure at the Combine if it wasn't both. And then I know he mentioned that he had a like a private meeting with him, and they went to his pro day or whatever else. They did a ton of homework on him, so I wouldn't be surprised by that. But it's just not the person I would pick. But in Brad, I trust. But yeah, I had them going for that tackle, whichever one it would be, for a long, long time. And maybe I'm the one being fooled instead of the other NFL GMs, but I am starting to bite on the potential smokescreen. I know Dan Campbell, head coach, mentioned that they wanted to go defense heavy in the draft, and obviously just look at the needs on the team, and there's more defense than offensive. And and like I said, maybe he's trying to smokescreen other teams away so they can get that tackle. But with his comments about Borum potentially being a starting tackle, especially since he is a much better right tackle than left, the comments about moving Sewell over to left, what if we just take that edge? I mean, I know we have already done a couple mocks where we do take Parker, the Clemson D end and whatnot. And don't get me wrong, I like the player, but I just don't know if I have the confidence in Borum that they have. Um, but I do think a trade down is preferable. Obviously, Brett Holmes is known for moving all around the draft board, up, down, any round. It doesn't matter. He moved up 20 spots for JMO in the first. He dropped back 6 spots from 6 to 12 to get Gibbs, and then adding the Laporta pick. So he's done both moves up and down. Obviously, it doesn't per se affect the first round, but he made the big bold Tesla trade last year, 3 third round picks to move up. We've moved back 3 times in the third before we took Hendon Hooker. We traded. He talked about trading up for Onzarike and one of the inside the dens. Obviously, he didn't, and he took him in second. But he was having talks about trading up, and it's one of those things where you don't know exactly which round he will go in, but I can promise you and guarantee you there will be at least 2 to 3 trades throughout the duration of the draft for the Lions.
Yeah, sorry about that interruption there. My dog freaks out when there are storms, so I had to put her in her cage. So,
Poor
but yeah,
puppy.
I totally agree with you with the possibility at 17 because like we both said there are so many different ones that we could do, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if it is somewhat of a smokescreen. Because I do think Borum is also starter worthy. Do I want him to be our number one right tackle going into the season? Not necessarily, but I think we could have worse. With that being said, I would feel
Sure.
much better if he was our, starter for maybe 2 weeks while we let the rookie get up to speed.
Fair
With
enough.
that being said, however, if you're looking for some new gear as your team, signs players and drafts players as the draft comes up and different things are going on, check out Fanatics. They got a lot of good stuff for good prices. Link is in the description. And then, speaking of, new players on new teams and everything like that, let's jump right into our Lions 7 round mock draft. Because as we get closer to the actual draft, we're what 25 days away as we sit right now on April 2nd. Um, we're going to see a lot of things heat up when it comes to certain players and
Mm,
certain teams. 21.
21, 3 weeks from today.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I must be thinking last year, April 27th. either way, with that being said, there's going to be a lot of changes going on over the next 3 weeks from today, as you mentioned. With that being said, to start off the mock draft, we're just going to go back and forth each round and just kind of go through, the different things that we thought as we went through this process. So, first of all, I think we both had like minds here because I traded down from 17 to 21 with the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I'm not going to lie, I did think I may have gotten a little too much, but this was offered to me, and I felt okay. It's not a crazy offer, and it's pretty much exactly what I want. I got pick 21 and pick 53, so first and second round picks for them to move up to 17, which, like I said, is quite a bit to
We
move
have
up,
insanely close trades.
which makes sense using the same model. So, with that being said, I traded down to 21 and I took no one other than Caden Proctor, the tackle from Alabama, for a lot of the things that I mentioned. And look, I get your trepidation. Don't get me wrong. There's a reason he's not a consensus top five pick anymore at this stage of the draft. But with that being said, getting a guy like Caden Proctor, who is a traitsy behemoth of a man, at 6'7", 350 pounds. He has a pretty good blend of power with just aggressive play. He's very raw though. Don't get me wrong. That's kind of the reason why he's fallen as far as he did. Everybody saw those traits coming out of high school, and that's why he was a 5-star. And then obviously just didn't live up to that billing this past season at Alabama. But he's got some issues with leverage and things like that. Being 6'7", it's hard for him sometimes to stay low and be able to get that good leverage on the defensive lineman. But his run defense, his run blocking is very, very good, which you'd expect out of a guy that's as big as he is. Really, his problems mostly come, in my opinion, in pass blocking. He does have a lot of, you know, he's especially raw in pass blocking, I guess is the best way to put it. But I think he can become very, very good with good coaching. And I mean, that's exactly what the Lions have over here with Hank Fraley. With that being said, though, he really has all the traits that you look for. He's a solid mover for his size. And I just feel this makes a lot of sense for the Lions and Brad Holmes to pull the trigger, especially considering the trade down. It's way worth it. I'm not going to lie, there was a tackle on the board that I probably would have preferred, but I do not see him being there at this point in the draft. So I went ahead with Proctor just because I felt it was a little more realistic. And I just think Brad loves this kid, man. I feel like that's who he wants.
Yeah, as I mentioned before, I have seen the Lions attached to him all throughout the offseason. He's just not my personal favorite, but at the same time, I would trust your evaluation a lot more. You work with O lines. I mean, I've watched film and whatnot on him, and he obviously has high points. I mean, he's going to be a first round pick to somebody. Um, I just like other guys more, and maybe I took the tackle that you were thinking of that you didn't think he would be there. I just used the model, and if they were there, I took them, and I do think I kind of got a haul with the draft, and as I kind of mentioned before, the trade. For my mock, I traded down as well from 17 to 23, and I picked up pick 54 from the Eagles. So great, kind of hovering right where you are, just a couple picks away. And I took Caleb Lomu, the left tackle from Utah. And I personally would prefer, with how this board fell, taking a left tackle and leaving Sewell over on the right side. While I do think, once again, not to beat a dead horse, but if you caught our last few shows, I think you'd have no problems at all adjusting to the left side. But I'm a fan of if it ain't broke, don't fix it, and just let him do his thing where he has been. And I think Lomu, who's already been a left tackle in college his whole career, just let him stay there and let him do his thing. As you mentioned in a prior podcast, he is slightly raw, but with Hank Fairley here, we uh, we have the guys and all the tools we need in there to get him going. And in my opinion, even with him being slightly raw, he's a day one plug and play starter at left tackle. So in my opinion, we fill one of our biggest needs in the first round and pick up a second round pick as we move on with that.
Yeah, and obviously we had very, very similar minds there. And actually, Lomu wasn't the guy I was thinking of. It was actually Maui Goa, which is a guy that I really like from Miami, but I just don't see him being there at 21 or 21.
The right
Um,
tackle for Miami?
yeah, um,
Yeah, okay, no. I would have.
it
Yeah,
was
that
weird. Like Freeling was the only offensive. It was Freeling and Fano were the only two linemen gone at that point, and I was just like, I would go Maui Goa here, but I just don't see him
yeah,
being there.
he's gonna be a top five pick in my
Yeah,
opinion. So
yeah. But also with that being said, Caden Proctor did play left tackle at Alabama, so he doesn't necessarily have to move to the right. I just think he probably, fares better in the NFL as a right tackle. But who knows? I mean,
I say
they
if
might
his
decide
pass
to keep him
blocking
there.
is what's holding him back, then I
Yep.
would probably make that move.
And just, his body type and his play type just fits better for a right tackle
Yeah, he
in
is
the
huge. I'll give
NFL.
him that. And as you
Yeah.
mentioned, he does have all the traits. I personally am not just a big trait guy.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely hear you there. I personally don't think I love Caden Proctor. I don't know if I would necessarily make that the pick. But I just, like I said, I wanted to do that this time just because I really think Brad Holmes loves the guy. I mean,
Oh
he's
yeah,
gone.
they've been.
They've been all over him all
Yep.
draft. So, with that being said, though, with pick 50, I took one of my favorite players in this draft, which is going to sound very similar to another one of my favorite players in this draft. Gabe Akas, I believe is how it's pronounced. It might be Jackass. I don't think it is, though. To be honest with you, I'm pretty sure it's not that. So, um, based on everything I saw, though, it's Akas, and I could be saying that wrong, but I hope I'm not. With that being said, though, he is very, very reminiscent of T.J. Parker, another guy that I really, really like for the Lions. I mean, I want to say almost the same like style of player. Obviously, I think T.J. Parker has a little bit more meat on the bone as of right now, and that's why he's going to go a little bit higher. But same style, 6'4", 260, very strong physical player. Excuse me, run defender. Very aggressive. He does have a shallow rush bag though, so he's not a guy you're gonna come in and expect to be a double digit sack guy right away. I could see it at some point, but he also does kind of lack that twitch that you would like out of your pure pass rushers. But I think he really is what the Lions like, which is a power rusher that can stop the run and set the edge. And getting that at pick 50, I think is very good value. And, like I said, very similar to TJ Parker. And I think that's exactly what the Lions are looking for in an edge opposite of Hutch, as we've seen with the guys that they've, added throughout Hutch's career so far.
Yeah, with pick 50, I went similar fashion, different player. I went Zion Young, defensive end from Missouri. Uh, the Lions have been needing that pass rush on the other side of Hutch since forever, since they drafted Hutch, and I think they finally go and get their guy now. And while he is, in everything I've read about him, deemed more of a, I don't want to say a pass rush specialist, but a pass rusher than a run support guy, he does have 16 TFLs last year. So he's not, I don't want to say inept, but I don't know why the narrative around him is so much more with a pass rusher because he has 16 TFLs to only 6.5 sacks. And I say only, but I mean, he still got pretty much one every other game. Um, and he was kind of the guy that was, I hate to say headhunted, but targeted, kind of like Hutches for our defense. So he was the guy that a lot of people were trying to take out of the game, and he still made quite a few plays, especially being with Missouri in the hard division that they're in. So I think with the addition of Lomu and now getting Zion Young, I feel like the biggest two needs on this team on each side of the trench are filled up, and we still have pick 54 from that trade down here coming up.
Yeah, for sure. And then with pick 53, so this is kind of a weird spot for me. I traded down twice in the same round. I went from pick 53, got an offer from the Texans for pick 59 and a next year third. I felt I couldn't turn that down, so I just went ahead and grabbed that. And then I packaged pick 59 and pick 118 to the LA Rams for pick 61 and 93. So I added a third rounder here, moved up, about uh, 28 spots or so, something around those lines. Don't want to do math right now, so I'm probably pretty far off on that. But with that being said, I only moved down 2 spots in the second round and moved up, 20 plus spots in the third, from the fourth to the third. So I felt I was getting pretty good, value there, essentially, getting a third round pick this year and next year, just to move down like 9 spots. So I will definitely take that. And then with that being said, with pick 61, I took one of my favorite players in this draft, Keontae Scott, the defensive back for Miami. I'm very surprised he was even there, but like we mentioned before, every mock draft simulator is a little different and has different player rankings. And Keontae Scott still sitting there, I thought was an obvious pick. I was eyeing him at pick 53, I can't lie, but the value to trade down was just too much. And based on, what teams were ahead of me, I thought I could get him. So with that being said, though, he's a slot guy, obviously not really an outside corner necessarily. More of like, I would say a hybrid safety than a real like slot corner, which, we'll talk about another player like that a little bit later in my mock. But he's a blazer, man. He came out and ran a 4.3. He's one of the best blitzers in this class, period, from a defensive back standpoint. He's a very juicy energy defender, like very twitched up athlete, but also brings the energy in every down, every play. Good in the run defense, physical. He is a little bit limited in coverage, though. I think he's more of a, like I said, a real safety that plays slot than a corner that plays the slot. Just because his coverage issues do kind of make me feel he'd be best for that, which I think is best for the Lions as well, because that's kind of what we're looking for right now. Obviously, we could use an outside corner, but I'm not going to say he can't do it. At 6 foot 195, I think there's a chance that you take all of his athletic traits with his build and you coach him up a little bit and make him able to play outside. But I don't think that's where he's going to make his money in the NFL.
Yeah, with pick 54, in my opinion, the draft fell the most perfect way it could for my top three picks in terms of needs. And I've been saying on Twitter and on the podcast, I feel like we have not giant, the three biggest needs on the team are tackle, end, and linebacker. And at pick 54 that I acquired from the trade down earlier, Jacob Rodriguez was just staring me in the face, linebacker from Texas Tech. Um, in my opinion, he's the best linebacker in this draft, not named Sonny Styles. So, um, obviously, but Styles is probably going to be a top 5 to 10 pick. So, we got the next best thing that we could add a position of need. So not only is it um, filling a hole, but it's filling a hole with someone that I feel like could be an NFL starter for the next 10 years. He won the Butkus Award for best linebacker in college football last year, as well as I think it's the Benerick, but it's the best defensive player in college football last year as well.
Oh yeah, the Bednarik award.
Benerick, okay. Um, I'm like, I've never heard it said, but I've seen it spelled out. I'm just like,
Really? That's kind of surprising. You don't know who Chuck Bednarik is.
I do not off the top of my head at least. I do have 3 concussions from my playing day, so maybe that plays a factor. But
I think he's probably right up there with you. He played a long time ago, though, so to be
okay.
fair, he played in like the 50s.
Oh,
That's
okay, then
yeah.
yeah. Then yeah, I'm like I know Butkus. Like I mean, I shouldn't be on the show if I don't, but I know Butkus. And yeah, he's just a do-it-all playmaker. I wish I had it written down. I had it before, and then it was too much of a text. But I know he had several forced fumbles. Um, he's just an overall playmaker. Tons of TFLs, a little bit of coverage. I'm not gonna say like a gluey linebacker, but no fault in his coverage game. He can also blitz and rush in. I kind of feel like he's a Jack Campbell 2.0. And having a second one of him on this defense would be, in my opinion, immaculate, especially after getting a tackle and an edge.
Yeah, I definitely don't hate the Rodriguez pick. He was somebody I was looking at too. I opted not to go for him though, simply because I felt he was a little redundant with the other Rodriguez, which is his cousin. I think Malcolm Rodriguez and Jacob Rodriguez are very, very, very similar players. And
I
I
didn't know they were related.
oh really?
Yeah.
um, which now that I think about it, they might not be. I think I saw that and just kind of assumed, but I
No,
think that person might not have been telling the truth. So,
that'll be easy to
that
find out.
yeah. But with that being said, that was really the only reason I didn't go there. And just value wise, I feel the linebacker class is pretty deep. So with that being said, though, with pick 93, I took Logan Jones, the interior offensive lineman from Iowa. Now, a lot of people might call me crazy for saying this. Okay, he is a little bit older. He's going to be 25 during his rookie year, which is not great. Um, and he's a little undersized at 6'3", 299, just barely under 300. But good mover, good technique, really good in the zone scheme. Obviously, he needs to add some mass or some play strength, because just under 300 pounds, you want him to be a little bit closer to 310 or more. And I think he could play left guard, but he's definitely more of a true center prospect. Which who knows? Maybe he wins the center job and Cade Mays plays left guard. I don't know. I mean, I could see a lot of different things happening. I do think he's a starter level center, so maybe he takes over after Cade Mays, moves on after this contract. Who knows with that? But either way, it's really good depth, and like I said, I think he could probably start at the left guard spot. Given that he adds the strength and the mass that I talked about earlier. And then another thing is, his length is suboptimal. Obviously, he's got shorter arms than what you'd like. And that, lends him to get beat by the power rush a little too often. So he does have a lot of things to work on, but I think the value is there. And I think he's a Detroit Lion through and through in terms of his play style.
Yeah, with my next pick, I have pick 118. I made only that one trade. Everything else is the Lions' original pick slash trades we've made in the past that were actually made. At 118, I took Bud Clark, the safety from TCU. He's a three-time team captain, 14 total interceptions in his college career. He's a little bit bigger, being 6'2", and even with us getting um, Clark, the veteran that we talked about at the beginning of the show, and Eisen from Tampa Bay, we could always go a little bit more youthful because we don't know the long-term ramifications from Kirby's knee injury. And if everyone heals up between Kirby and Branch, we can always have Branch potentially go back to a slot. But Bud Clark could play a free or a strong safety. There's a way we can make it work, but the value, um, I don't want to say quite this late in the draft, but the value after pick 100, to get a guy who can do it all. He also had, I looked it up while you were talking, two TFLs and a sack last year, so he can blitz a little bit too from the defensive back position. He's kind of a do-it-all guy, and to be honest, I don't even know if he'll be here at 118. I don't think it's too late. Like it's nothing like, oh my God, he shouldn't be here. But I do have a feeling he'll go a little before this. But if he is there, I would not hesitate to take him. And in my opinion, that would be the um, perfect younger player to put in with the mix of veterans that we got in the free agency this year for the safety position.
Yeah, and it seemed like we thought very similar once again in the fourth round. Different player, but I do love Bud Clark as well. I took Jalen Kilgore, the safety out of South Carolina. And I like Kilgore because kind of opposite from what I said with oh my gosh, how am I spacing on the player that I took? Um, like how I said with the safety I took earlier, that guy was more of like a slot, you know, safety
Oh, for
hybrid.
Miami.
Yes, Keontae Scott. I don't know how I was spacing his name, but point being, Jalen Kilgore is. I'm not going to say the opposite. They're very similar players, but I think Kilgore is a safety that could play outside corner, and kind of gives you versatility that way. Obviously, he'll probably play more of the slot safety position, but he does have some versatility with that. 6'1", 210. Is a very good athlete, rangy cover guy. He's good in the run defense. He's really good versus tight ends, which is what you want out of that kind of safety. A very lengthy type of safety guy who can get up on those tight ends and press, can press wide receivers as well, which kind of makes me think he might be able to play outside corner. And then, obviously, like any safety, he's best in zone, but he's actually pretty decent in man too. So that's another reason why he might be able to play outside corner. And then one thing, at 6'1", 210, you'd want this kind of safety to be a little bit more physical than Kilgore is currently. Um, and his ball skills are just not that awesome. So he's definitely probably going to be more of like an in the box safety, or like I said, an outside corner possibly. I could see it, but again, probably better at the safety position in the NFL. And I think at this point you get Keontae Scott and Jalen Kilgore, who are very similar but different in enough ways that they can both kind of be Swiss Army knives for the defensive backfield.
Yeah, pick 128. I went with my Kalen Proctor kind of clone, but just later on in the draft. Markel Bell out of Miami. Massive, massive individual. He is 6'9", 346. And being the starting left tackle for Miami, and obviously they did not win the national championship, but they went to the national championship. He started all 16 games for them and gave up 0 sacks and only 9 total pressures in 558 pass blocking reps. So if you have a guy with that big, that much, I'll just say size and girth, even with us taking in my mock Lomo earlier in the draft, I can't pass this guy at this point in time. I think Hank Fairley would get the most out of him, and with his traits, and like I said, I know I'm not a big trait guy, but I feel like pick 128 is a lot different than picking the top 20. Granted, we traded back to 21, 22, but still. And this guy's just too good for me to pass up. You can always have use for more linemen, goal line formations, and unfortunately, injuries happen in the NFL. So with uh, Borum only on a 1 year deal, I know Merkel plays left tackle. We can always do Sewell on the other side if we flip him. Either way, I would take a tackle with that kind of protection on my blind side any day.
Yeah, for sure. And I definitely don't hate doubling up at a position like tackle. With that being said, I take my first linebacker with pick 157, Lander Barton from Utah. It's kind of funny you mentioned Jacob Rodriguez as similar to Jack Campbell, because that's how I see Barton as well. 6'5", 255, obviously has a really good frame for the position. A really good athlete as well. He's got solid coverage skills too. Really good mover for size. He's obviously better in zone, as I would say most linebackers are. And he shows really solid burst to get to the play, wherever that may be. Whether it be behind the line of scrimmage, side to side, or down the field. So with that said, though, he does need to add a little bit of play strength. He needs to add a little bit more physicality to his game, a little bit better angles, things like that, coverage awareness as well. But either way, I mean, getting a guy like Barton with his athletic skills, at his size, with his temperament and style, I think really is a good fit for the Lions. And he probably won't start right away, but I could see him being in the will in 2027 if I should say, Rodriguez ends up moving on.
Yeah, I would not mind that one bit. At pick 157, I have Nick Singleton, the running back from Penn State. He has freakish athletic traits, and once again, I do find it slightly contradictory, but at the same time, it is what it is on me not liking traits, and then back-to-back picks where I'm talking about traits. But once again, this is after pick 150, and we need a power back more long-term, in my opinion. Although he's not, kind of like Montgomery, he's not just a power back. This isn't LeGarrette Blount. He also has quite a bit of speed. And I know we got Pachenko for this year, and that would help Singleton not have to come in here and obviously take the giant workload, especially with Gibbs. But once again, injuries happen, and in this early portion of this mock, I had us, in my opinion, fill all of our needs. So now we're kind of just putting icing on the cake, and I feel like getting a current running back 3 that is probably going to be your running back 2 for the next 4 to 5 years, because Pachenko's often hurt and excuse me, and only signed a 1 year deal, so we don't know if he's even going to be here going into next year, following the season, obviously. And he is ultra productive. He had 3,460 yards rushing and 45 rushing touchdowns. On top of that, in his career, he had over 100 receptions for just under 1,000 yards and 9 receiving touchdowns. So he can also catch a little bit out of the backfield. So this late in the draft, with what we already have, I think this would be a steal for the Lions.
Yeah, and I definitely have to agree. Nick Singleton is one of my personal favorite running back prospects in this entire draft, along his Penn State teammate, Katron Allen, which I think Katron Allen fits the Lions to a T as well. And they had both of them in for a visit. So either or Penn State running back, and I am a happy camper. With that being said, with pick 181, similar to you, I feel like I kind of filled all of our needs to this point. And so I kind of went with something that's not a glaring need, but I felt was the best player available. I took Landon Robinson, the interior defensive lineman out of the Navy. 6 foot, 290 pounds, obviously a little undersized, but he's a really, really good athlete. He might be the best athlete out of the defensive tackle class this year, just kind of overall with all of his testing numbers. And with him being a little bit undersized, he does play with really good leverage, solid play strength, very explosive rusher. He does struggle with short arms, though. That is one thing, and he struggles in the run game a little bit, which you would expect out of a little bit of an undersized kind of pass rusher type from the interior of the defensive line. Kind of think Levi Onwuzurike in a lot of ways, but I do think Robinson and Onwuzurike have very similar athletic profiles as well. So he could kind of just be our Levi replacement right away. However, similar to Yakas earlier, he has a shallow rush bag. He gets a little bit over aggressive in both pass and run game, which lead to not so good things all the time. And he could add some weight. So obviously, but like you mentioned as well, as you get later into the draft, you're kind of drafting for traits, what these guys could be. And obviously, at pick 181, if I can get even a rotational defensive lineman, I'm pretty happy. And I think that's basically, or bottom level, what Landon Robinson should be in the NFL.
It's funny you mentioned that because pretty much everything you said is about my 205 pick as well. But at pick 181, I kind of went with the tight end version of Singleton. I went with Dallin Bentley, the tight end from Utah. He is 6'4", 255, and in my opinion is exactly what the Lions are looking for in a tight end too. And just kind of like Singleton, the reason I compared him to that is just like we have Pachenko to be the veteran number two for now. We got Conklin in free agency on a 1 year deal who can be our tight end two now, and Bentley can come in as a tight end three as a rookie. And once again, we don't know if we're going to extend Pachenko after the season. We don't know if we're going to extend Conklin, but this gives us a viable, young, solid talent at the tight end position who could just fill that role at the end of the year. And once again, injuries happen, especially with Laporta. I'm kind of afraid of back injuries, kind of as you mentioned with Onzarike. Those don't tend to heal quick or sometimes fully, so I'm a little worried about that. But as we mentioned, and as you just mentioned, at pick 181, you gotta go for traits and what they could be. Worst case scenario, he'll be a rotational guy. He had 50 catches for 600 yards and 6 touchdowns, and one of the most elite traits that every article I looked up on him said is he has very good deep ball tracking for a tight end. And one other site compared him to a linebacker frame with reliable hands. So this late in the draft, I would love to get a kind of guy like that in case Laporta's back is still a little banged up. And even if it's not, he can be a tight end too for the future.
Yeah, and kind of funny. It seemed like we were on the same page yet again, except we just swapped the picks because you took tight end at 181. I took D line at 181. You took D line at 205, and I took tight end at 205. I
I
took Tanner
promise you, I did not
Koziol.
even look at your mock.
um, I took Tanner Koziol, the tight end from Houston, which is a guy I've talked about a lot on the show throughout the draft process. A guy I'm a very, very big fan of, which coincidentally, Houston was my NCAA college football 26 team. So I know Koziel pretty well from that. But with that said, this is mainly based on his film. 6'7", 260 pounds. Obviously, a very very large man with a very big catch radius and good hands to go along with it. He's also a plus athlete. Not like he's not running a 4.4 or anything crazy like that, but for his size and everything, he's a really good mover. And he's got decent speed. Not a super explosive guy. Not somebody you're gonna necessarily, line up out at the X receiver and hope he's going to beat a corner one on one. Although I've seen it happen before in college. He's, could play slot though. With that being said, though, um, he does need some work with his blocking. I know I've talked about him a little bit before on the show about his blocking, and it's not really. He's not a great inline tight end, but he's a guy that can kind of come across the formation and kick out or pull or things like that from the tight end spot. So he does offer some blocking upside, but nothing too crazy. And then, like I said, he lacks explosivity, so he's not a guy you're going to really ask to be your number one tight end. I think Tanner Koziol is like exactly what you look for in a number two tight end in the NFL because he's pretty good at everything. And he's a guy that can actually go out there and like think about Koziol and Laporta on the field with JMO and Gibbs and Amon Ra. I think that could actually be a pretty good red zone option for Jared Goff with his size and catch radius and hands and everything like that.
Yeah, it sounds good to me. And as you mentioned with your prior pick at pick 205, I went kind of rotational D lineman Caleb Proctor from the Southeast Louisiana Lions. He already has a little bit of lion in him. Um, Terrible segue. But he is a pass rush specialist from the inside, and we have mentioned so often that the best kind of pressure is always interior pressure. He had 9 sacks from the D tackle position last year, and I understand that he's not playing in one of the bigger name colleges or anything like that. But this is pick 205 once again. I don't feel like, at least without hindsight, that there's some superstar waiting for us at this pick. But we could always use more trench work. We can always use more D linemen. And I think one thing that we lack on our D line with the new additions, because I already have Zion Young in this mock, is some interior pressure, and that is what Caleb Proctor specializes in. I don't see him coming for McNeil or Tyleik Williams' job or anything like that. But as a rotational guy who can kind of collapse the pocket at 205, I'm more than happy to take that.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh,
And with that
and
being, oh, sorry.
sorry, one more thing. I looked down at my phone because I looked up one more thing on him. I'm not the biggest PFF fan, as anyone that watches us know, but for those who are, he had an 86.5 PFF grade last year, and that ranks ninth overall out of 887 interior D linemen. So,
Yeah, definitely can't
if that's your
complain
thing.
there. With that being said, I went ahead and picked another defensive lineman. This time was an edge, doubled up at the edge position, which I would not be surprised if the Lions do. I could see him double up at lineman, offensive lineman, defensive lineman, edge. I could even like double up at corner or safety, like kind of how I did earlier. With that being said, though, Mikhail Kamara, the edge from Indiana, and I love this pick for the value. He's a little undersized at 6'1", 250. But he's a really solid athlete. He lacks a lot of those top traits that we talked about earlier. But he's a solid. He's solidly built. Violent hands. Very aggressive. He's very a high motor guy, which is what the Lions really like. He plays with good leverage. Being a little bit shorter. A lot of these guys can, as long as they can have the play strength to keep up with it. It helps them gain better leverage. And the one thing, not one thing, but a thing that I don't love about him is he's too reliant on his power rush, which really won't help him too much in the NFL because at 6'1", 250, it's going to be hard for him to overpower a lot of these offensive tackles. And another thing, his run defense, I don't think it's going to be a thing in the NFL really. He didn't really do a great job at setting the edge in college. And if that's a worry that you have in college, it's probably only going to be exacerbated in the NFL. But for at pick 213, I think taking a pass rush specialist that could actually be very, very good at that is really good value.
Absolutely. And with 213, I kind of once again went with the traits. I went with Domani Jackson. He's a cornerback from Alabama. And to be honest, I'd kind of be a little bit surprised if he was still here. He was up there in the model I used as a best player available, one of the top like two or three, and I'm kind of like surprised to see his name a little bit. I'm not going to act like I knew all about him beforehand, but he's a name I've at least heard of. He started all 13 games for Alabama as an outside corner. He had 7 pass breakups and 2 interceptions, and he is a speedster. I'll say only because, in my opinion, it's not as impressive as what I'm about to say after. But at the combine, he ran a 4.41. However, in his high school, he was also in track, and he ran the 100 meter in 10.25 seconds in 2021, and that ties the state record. So I know California has a lot of good athletes out there. So for him to tie a state record, obviously one of the caveats I'll say of the 40-yard dash is not everyone's used to starting in that start position and whatnot. So if you hear 4.41 speed, it's not slow, don't get me wrong, but I feel like his true speed is much faster than that.
Yeah, for sure. And then with that being said, rounding out my mock draft, I know you have one more pick left. I went ahead and I took a running back, and I think this running back will not be here. So when I say this name, people in the comments don't kill me, okay? Eli Heidenreich, the running back from Navy. So this will be the second Navy player the Lions draft in this draft if it goes the way that I put it. But with how he tested, I don't think he's going to last to the seventh round, if I'm being honest with you. But at 6 foot, 195 pounds, he ran a 4.4. Obviously, he showed, he's got a little bit more top end speed than a lot of people thought. He's very versatile out of the backfield, as a receiver and as a runner. Solid change of direction, but he's not really juicy in that way of he's not Jameer Gibbs going to be juking people out, spin moving and all that. He is a straight line runner that has a little bit of shiftiness to him, but nothing crazy. And then, he also finishes runs pretty well for his size. And, at the end of the day, he's got short arms, but at running back, that doesn't matter very much. Considering what it matters at offense, offense or defensive line. Um, and like I said, don't think he'd be here, but this is good value at the end of the draft to get like a backup third string running back. Into your point earlier with Singleton, Pacheco's only on a 1 year deal, so make taking a running back would make a lot of sense. And although I think you could probably find one in undrafted free agency, which I probably would have done if Heidenreich wasn't there.
Yeah, I think that I was gonna say goes without saying. Neither of us have too much faith in Vaki because I'm like I know we have a younger-ish guy, but we'll see what happens. With my last pick in this mock, pick 222, I have Fernando Carmona Jr. Because as you mentioned, you can never have too many linemen. He is a guard tackle, just kind of a totality offensive lineman from Arkansas. He had 13 starts at left tackle in 2024. In 2025, they moved him into left guard, and he started 12 games at left guard. So he's got multiple double-digit starts at both sides of the left side of the line, with, in my opinion, left guard and left tackle being the most uncertain. Granted, I know I took Lomu in round one. Uh, this late, I would never scoff at someone that is versatility and just gives us another camp body. I doubt he would win the left guard spot over a guy like Mahogany or Birched or um, Scruggs, but it's another body to put in there. And with his versatility, I can see him potentially getting a roster spot over one of those guys who may only have that one position of playability, I'll say.
Yeah, for sure. And like we mentioned with these last few picks, it's always hard. You just kind of want to take the best player available regardless of position. And obviously, you're always like, okay, what do we need? But at the end of the day, you got to take the most talented player. With that being said, want to do your own mock draft, check out sticktothemodel.com. With their new BAGM mode, you can do it all. You can do the free agency, you can do the draft, you can trade players, whatever you feel like doing, it is possible. Go over there and check it out. Sticktothemodel.com. Link is in the description. Use our code MFN2026 and save 10% at checkout. With that being said, moving on to our last segment of the show, sort of a quick NFL news like roundup segment. Myles Garrett, recently was restructured by the Browns, and a lot of people are saying, "Oh, this signals that he's going to get traded." I wouldn't be surprised either way because they do need money, but at the same time, Myles Garrett is a guy who requested a trade just a year ago, and then got paid. So if you're a guy who really cares about winning more than anything, you probably don't want to be in Cleveland right now. And the fact that they restructured his deal only 1 year into it to make it more tradable kind of tells me they might be looking to trade him, especially considering the Max Crosby trade just fell through. And maybe some teams are a little bit more willing to trade 2 first-round picks for an edge rusher. And then on top of that, too, think about the fact the Browns just put in a new motion or whatever you want to call it to allow draft picks to be traded for up to 5 years in advance. Call me crazy, but for them to restructure Myles Garrett the same week they put that in kind of seems fishy to me. And then they're still saying they're not going to trade him. We'll see what happens there. And then speaking of trades, the AJ Brown trade is still a thing that is possible. But I think it's going to happen post June 1st based on his contract, just because way too much money right now that the Eagles would have to eat just to trade him. So,
Yeah, I don't see Myles Garrett going anywhere. You don't trade a talent like that. I know they're kind of, I hate to say rebuilding because they're always rebuilding. Um, and they just kind of turned over their new leaf. They just got a new coach, and I mean, maybe they do. Maybe that's their Stafford move to kind of kickstart everything. But I just don't see it happening. And then in terms of the AJ Brown, I do think he gets dealt. Like you said, it might be after a June 1st kind of thing, just financially. But there is a lot of smoke I see with him going to New England, and I feel like that just makes too much sense at this point not to get done. New England has a ton of cap space. They have some extra draft capital. I feel like those two can just make it work. They need a number one receiver for Drake May, so I feel like it just kind of works all the way around.
yeah, and I definitely agree there. And speaking of the AJ Brown trade, another team that was interested was the LA Rams, which recently Sean McVay came out and said that Devontae Adams was actually included in trade negotiations. Obviously, he didn't say for AJ Brown specifically, but if you read the tea leaves, you have to assume. My assumption was always the Rams were trying to trade a first and Devontae Adams for AJ Brown. That was what I always thought because the contract of Devontae and everything like that, it just made sense. And then also the Eagles immediately replace AJ Brown. Obviously, Devontae's not quite as good at this point, but they don't really need him to be as good with how their offense works. So that makes a lot of sense in my opinion. And then speaking of the Rams, Puka Nakua is currently in rehab, which is just wild to even say. Former fifth round pick, all pro, and now is in rehab after having a few instances of issues. And maybe that kind of lends to the fact of why the Rams might be looking to trade for AJ Brown. I mean, maybe they see Puka Nakua as an unreliable player, and obviously he's going to be up for a contract pretty soon. So who knows how that saga is going to go down, but those things might go hand in hand.
Yeah, I'm just glad he's reaching out to get help. I've been kind of critical about him on social media for being a knucklehead because he seems to be doing. Uh, I'm not trying to have a glass house here, not like I'm perfect, but I see him doing quite a few things wrong, and in the headlines a little too often for someone of his stardom. But this may kind of speak to why some of those instances occur. So I'm just glad he's seeking help and wish him the best.
Yeah, and I can definitely get behind that as well. With that being said, moving on, Kirk Cousins signed with the Las Vegas Raiders. which everybody's freaking out because it's $172 million over 5 years. That's not really the contract. Okay. So the contract is a 1 year, $20 million deal with a club option after that every year, basically, which in my opinion means Mendoza, as long as Mendoza works out, then they'll get rid of Kirk after the season and be done with it. And I think they also don't really want to start Mendoza right away. And call me crazy, but this is what happens when a former quarterback who was also the greatest of all time becomes a part of your organization. You start doing stuff like this where you can not only get a guy like Kirk, which we've already talked about Kirk going to the Raiders many, many times. You get a guy like Kirk who is going to be a great leader in the locker room, a great number one quarterback to start the season with. And he can also back up Mendoza and be a great backup because he's going to teach him all the right things. Um, and I think that was kind of a Tom Brady, like, look, guys, this is what we need to do for Mendoza. So I really like it for that reason.
I like it as well. I'm not too keen. It's going to kind of contradict each other, but I see both sides of the coin. Unfortunately, I'm not too keen on the more old school method of drafting someone at number one and then benching them for that rookie season. It's not uncommon. It's just not as modern, I guess I'll say. But as you mentioned, Tom Brady's in the front office. That's what happened with Brady. Mahomes sat out his rookie year and sat behind Alex Smith. Aaron Rodgers sat out his first like 3 to 4 years behind Favre, and Favre sat out behind Starr. So I mean, it has a track record for success. So I mean, I get it, but at the same time, most common, at least now, is you just draft them, throw them into the fire like Stafford and uh, Bryce Young, and name any other quarterback. Although look at some of the quarterbacks that have done that and have had early struggles, like Cam Ward and Bryce Young. So maybe there is something to it, but for the contract, because of like you mentioned, all of the options and I don't want to say buyouts, but that's just options, team options and whatnot. Um, it makes sense for like the 1 year 20 million, but when you see the 5 years like 140 or 170, whatever it was, it kind of annoys me just because I know there's so many teams nowadays, and it's a league thing, it's not a team thing, but so many void years, so many other ways to kind of manipulate the cap and whatnot. It gets to every time I try to, and maybe it's just a personal thing. Every time I try to dig into the more financial aspect of the NFL, I get just more and more confused because there's so many between the signing bonus, the roster bonus, incentives, then the void years and everything else that goes on that um, it makes, in my opinion, the ridiculous like a 5 year contract for Kirk Cousins, who you obviously no one believes he's going to be there 5 years. Um, but it's like the fact that that's even the technical contract or whatever, just with the buyout or whatever at the end, is just a little absurd to me.
Yeah, and I definitely hear what you're saying there. With that being said, that is going to be it for this show, though. As always, we appreciate you guys for joining us. And, we will be back yet again next week, Wednesday at 6 p.m. With that said, before we let you guys go, though, this Saturday, we are having our first event under the MFN, umbrella. We are hosting a Final Four watch party, and none other than Michigan has made it to the Final Four. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Check it out at ticketstripe.com/MFN presents. Get your tickets if you live in the area, in the Kalamazoo area. It's going to be a lot of fun. All you can eat, all you can drink. So check it out. The link will be in the description. But with that being said, as always, we appreciate you guys for joining us. You can find me at JSoSweet, James at Gullet_James, and both of us at MIFB Network and MichiganFootballNetwork.com. Once again, we appreciate you guys for watching, and we will see you next Wednesday.